Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Okay, I'm going to get started by just welcoming everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Nice to see everyone here. Welcome to everyone joining online as well. Today is our group learning program where each Sunday and Wednesday I get together with students to be able to help them understand the path to enlightenment. We start each one of our classes with meditation, so I'm going to guide you in a meditation session, and then afterwards I usually will share some teachings to be able to help you guys. And today what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you guys what is a Buddhist pilgrimage. This is something that you can learn about and understand what it is and why somebody would actually do this. I just recently went on a Buddhist pilgrimage, and I have a lot of photos and stories and things that I can share with you guys about this so that you guys can learn about what is a Buddhist pilgrimage. And then as we go, I'll be opening up for questions and see what it is you guys would like to ask about. So welcome to all of you guys that are here. As I mentioned, I start each class with meditation because this teachings of the Buddha are to guide you to enlightenment. What enlightenment is where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you will no longer experience any discontent feelings. You will have eliminated all the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of this can be eliminated from the mind through training of the mind. Oftentimes people think that it's the outside world that's causing you to be angry or frustrated, but what you can see through the teachings of the Buddha is that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings in a way that you can independently verify. And because your mind is actually causing these feelings, you can actually eliminate them as well. And meditation is an important component of that, but you wouldn't be able to just meditate your way to enlightenment. One of the biggest myths about the life story of the Buddha is people think that he sat under a tree, he meditated, and then instantly got to enlightenment. And this actually isn't true. It's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. So you wouldn't be able to meditate your way to enlightenment, but you also wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without meditation either. So you're going to need to do some training with meditation. So that's why we start each one of our classes with meditation. I'm going to be starting with some chanting to ease us into the meditation. You guys are welcome to chant along if you like. I see some of you guys have chanting sheets. If you need a chanting sheet, they're over there on the cabinet. You're welcome to help yourself to get one. It's important to understand that during the lifetime of the Buddha, he used chanting as a way to help his students commit the teachings to memory. Every 2 weeks, his students would come together and they would recite his teachings orally. So you can see from the origins of chanting that this isn't a rite, ritual, ceremony, worship, or prayer, or anything like that. There's nothing mystical or magical in the teachings of the Buddha. He used chanting purely as a learning tool, as a learning device, where today we might use books, audiobooks, videos, podcasts, things of this nature. Those didn't exist 2,500 years ago during the lifetime of the Buddha, so he needed to use chanting as a way to help his students commit the teachings to memory. So every 2 weeks they would recite his teachings, and that's where the origins of chanting in this tradition came from. If you read the English translations, you're going to see a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for the Buddha, and because of that, I don't think the Buddha even created these chants by himself. He wouldn't have gone around and said, "Here, chant these chants to me out of respect for me." This would be ego or arrogance if someone did this. And by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind no longer has any kind of ego or arrogance. You wouldn't be thinking of yourself as being above people or below people. You would just think about everybody as being equal. So I don't think that the Buddha even created these chants. But if you learn from a teacher how to move from anger, sadness, frustration, and all these other discontent feelings to the peaceful, joyful mental state state that is enlightenment, and this teacher didn't want anything from you or expect anything from you, you'd probably have a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for that person too. The Buddha was just teaching out of the kindness of his heart to be able to help people to understand how to attain this mental state that he had figured out how to attain. So if you would like to chant, the reason why we chant nowadays is to help ease our mind into meditation, and you'll find that it actually gives you more benefit in your meditation. So you're welcome to chant along. After the chanting, I'm going to come in with some guidance where I'm going to be essentially teaching you or instructing you how to meditate while we're actually meditating together. But then there's going to be a period of time of quietness where we're all meditating. Everyone here and everybody online who's joining will just all be meditating at the same time. Now, during this period of time of quietness, I'm sure you're going to hear occasional sounds. You might hear a car go by, a dog barking, a bird chirping. You might even hear someone here a cough or sneeze or something of that nature. If you're in meditation with a craving for permanent silence, when you hear a sound, you will cause your mind to be annoyed or frustrated or irritated or some other discontent feeling. This is the cause of discontent feelings, is that the mind is craving permanence while you live in an impermanent world. Everything around you is constantly changing. You're not going to be able to be in an environment where it's permanently quiet. So you're going to hear occasional sounds. And if you understand that the world around you is impermanent and you don't have a craving for permanence in your mind, then when you hear a sound during meditation, you can just be at ease and be peaceful because you understand the world's working exactly the way it's intended to work. That you'll see that things will arise, they will change, and they will fade away. And this is how sounds will happen in our time during the meditation. You'll hear sounds arise, change, and fade away. And this is normal because we live in an impermanent world. After that period of time of quietness, we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting, and then that's where I'll start today's class, helping you guys to understand what is a Buddhist pilgrimage and why somebody might be interested to do this kind of thing. In terms of your body position for meditation, there's 4 positions that the Buddha taught. And you would learn these different positions at different times as part of your journey to enlightenment. There's seated, lying, standing, and walking positions. So these are kind of like tools, like assembling a tool belt. And you would employ these different tools at different times. And you would learn these in various courses and retreats and things like that. But oftentimes people are starting in the seated position. So I'll give you guys a little bit of guidance on that just to get started, but just understand what I'm sharing with you, or just recommendations or suggestions that there's not just one way to sit. If there was only one way to sit, that would be permanence. And we don't live in that world. We live in an impermanent world where everybody's body is a little bit different. And what's important is that you find something that's comfortable. You're not interested in the body being painful, but you're also not interested in being luxurious either. You'd like it to be in the middle where it's comfortable. So you can use anything that I recommend and suggesting here, or if you find something on your own, you could use that too, as long as the body's comfortable, because we're training the mind here. We're not training the body. So you could be sitting on the floor, in a chair. If you're at home, you might be on a bench or a sofa or a wheelchair. You can sit however you like. But if you're on the floor, you might have some cushions under your rear. This will kind of help soften your seat a bit. And if you're going to bring your legs together in the cross-leg position, you might just choose to do that lightly. Whereas if they're real tight, it can impede the circulation and cause pain in the lower body. Some people like to put their legs off the mat. This gets your hips up in the air, and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, again, allowing the circulation to flow. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. If this is comfortable for you, you could use it. But again, it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way. There's other options here as well. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or their knees. Some people put their palms up. Some people just rest their hands comfortably in their lap. So you can put your hands and arms wherever you like. And the same thing's true for anyone in a chair or a bench or a sofa or a wheelchair. You can also sit however you like. Some people like to put their feet flat on the floor or lightly cross at the ankles, but you can see me sitting in a chair here with my legs crossed. So this is an option for you as well. And then you can put your hands and arms wherever you like. In terms of your upper body, it's helpful if this is erect, with the sternum up and the shoulders back. This will help keep your mind attentive and alert during the meditation. Whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you are real rigid with the upper body, your mind could be overactive or uptight. Meditation is a dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities from the mind and you're cultivating certain wholesome qualities in the mind. So you'd like the mind to be attentive and alert during the meditation, and having the sternum up and shoulders back will help you to be able to do that. And it'll also make it easy for you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. So again, I'm going to do some chanting to ease into the meditation. You guys are welcome to join in, and then I'm going to come back in with the guidance afterwards. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Bhutang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusarang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาพุทธังมหาเกวันหังอภิวาเตมิสวากขาโตมหาเกวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation, once again, welcome to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone here this morning. Welcome to everyone who's joining us online as well. As I was sharing, today is our group learning program, and what I'm going to do is share with you guys a topic of what is a Buddhist pilgrimage and helping you guys to understand why somebody might be interested in doing this sort of thing. As I go in my talk today, I'm going to open up for questions. As you guys would like to ask questions, you're welcome to ask anything that you like. We have microphones here in the middle of the room in the white bowl. All you need to do is come get a microphone, bring it back to your seat. If you press the gray button on the microphone, you'll see the lights come on, and you can hold it up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online as well. If you speak here without a microphone, they won't be able to hear you online. And then you can keep these microphones with you because you might have more than one question, or someone around you might have a question, and you can just share the microphone with them. And if you're not using the microphone, if you could just turn it off, that'll be helpful so we don't get feedback through the speakers. And then anybody who's online, you can ask questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comments section. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and ask any and all questions that you like that way. So this individual that we refer to as the Buddha, he actually was born in a place that we refer to today as Nepal, and he taught in northeast India. He was born in 563 BCE, and he died in 483 BCE. He lived for 80 years. He was born as a prince, destined to become a king, but ultimately by the age of 29, he decides to step away from his royal heritage and go off on this journey to be able to figure out how to get to enlightenment. By the age of 35, he actually attains enlightenment, and then he spends the rest of his life for the next 45 years up to the age of 80, sharing the teachings that it takes to be able to get to this enlightened mental state. And then ultimately he dies at the age of 80 at the year 483 BCE. And he dies of old age. Oftentimes people have myths and stories about how he actually died, but he actually died of old age. His body actually just gave out, and just like everybody else, he's impermanent. We're all going to meet with death. So what he did is he figured out how to get to enlightenment by himself without the help of any teachers or any guides. He then shares his teachings with countless people during his lifetime, helping countless people get to enlightenment during that period of time. And then he preserved his teachings in such a way that countless more people got to enlightenment after his death. These are the three primary criteria of what make a Buddha, is they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They will share their teachings that it took for their enlightenment with countless people, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they will preserve their teachings so that other people can get to enlightenment after their death. So this individual that we refer to as Siddhartha Gautama, that was his original name. He's actually known more commonly as the Buddha or Gautama Buddha, or any number of ways that people refer to him. He didn't do anything mystical or magical. He didn't teach any beliefs. He didn't teach rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer. He didn't teach any rules or commandments. Oftentimes, that's what people are used to when they come to things like this, is that maybe somebody's teaching rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer. If you see those kinds of things associated with the teachings of the Buddha, he actually didn't teach any of those kinds of things. Those people are misunderstanding what the Buddha actually taught. He taught you to actually train your mind. He also didn't teach rules and commandments that if you follow these rules, the world would become a better place. He never taught belief. It was always about learning, investigating, and examining his teachings, reflecting to independently verify whether they're true or they're false, and then practicing his teachings, integrating them into your day-to-day life to be able to train your mind. What enlightenment is where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you will no longer experience any discontent feelings. The mind will no longer experience any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of this can be eliminated from the mind through training of the mind. The Buddha discovered these individual pollutions that are in the mind. He refers to them as fetters. What a fetter is that during the lifetime of the Buddha, if they were trying to keep you confined to a certain area, like a prisoner, they would just attach a fetter around your ankle. What a fetter is a shackle and a chain and a ball, and then they would just keep you kind of in this open field. Where today we put prisoners in jail cells, where during the lifetime of the Buddha, they would attach a fetter around your ankle. So when he discovers these 10 individual pollutions that are in the mind, that is causing the mind to experience things like anger, sadness, frustration, and others, he refers to them as fetters, because it's keeping the mind trapped in this unenlightened state, continuing to experience discontent feelings over and over and over again. So all of his teachings are guiding you to be able to train your mind to get to a point where you uproot those fetters or those pollutions, those defilements out of the mind. And as you do, you'll gradually start seeing more and more of the qualities of enlightenment. Enlightenment isn't instantaneous. It's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. While we call it attaining enlightenment, one of the ways you might think about it is that the mind is already enlightened. You just have these pollutions in the way that are hindering you from being able to experience it. It's much like the sun is always there, but it's got clouds in front of it. And as you start to peel away the clouds, the rays of the sun start shining through more and more, and you can feel the qualities of the sun. Well, the mind is the same way, that you might think about the mind as already being enlightened, and when you get these pollutions out of the mind, the qualities of enlightenment will start shining through more and more and more. The only difference in this analogy is that ultimately the clouds are going to come back in front of the sun, where by the time you get to enlightenment, it's not possible for these pollutions to actually come back into the mind. It's a permanent mental state where you're experiencing that peace, calmness, serenity, contentedness with joy. By the time you get rid of these pollutions, you'll notice that your mind is focused. You have concentration, clarity, and deep memory because the mind's performing optimally. You're no longer experiencing all the difficulties and struggles that you might experience with your mind when it's in the unenlightened state. Because when you uproot these pollutions, the mind will then perform optimally. You'll notice that your personal and professional relationships are really blossoming. Where right now you might have a certain amount of bitterness and harshness and hostility in some of your relationships. That's coming from your own mind. Oftentimes people think that it's coming from the other person, and you might have anger and frustration thinking that they are the ones who are causing you to experience these things. But if you can see through that, through the teachings of the Buddha, you can actually understand what is the real problem in your mind, and then apply the actual tools and techniques to train the mind to uproot that, and you can experience harmonious relationships with everybody around you. This is part of what an enlightened being is experiencing. You'll notice by the time you get to enlightenment that you don't even experience a bad mood anymore. That is physically impossible for you to experience a bad mood. So this individual that we refer to as the Buddha, he taught from the age of 35 to 80. But as he was getting closer and closer to death, he was aware of this. And there was many countless people all throughout the world, all throughout that region of the world, Northeast India, that were actually enlightened. And there were plenty of students who were studying with him who weren't enlightened as well. And as he was getting close to his death, he was asked a question because he informed his students that he was about to die. This is how enlightened he was. He knew 3 months ahead, prior to his death, that he was going to die in 3 months. So he informed his students that he was going to be dying in 3 months. And of course, the students were asking him questions, and this was very wise of him because it allowed them to be able to get any last minute teachings that they maybe needed clarification on. And one of his students spoke up and was concerned and said, well, hey, what are we going to do when you die? Because there's all these people that are coming to visit you and you're not going to be here. Right? They couldn't send out a Facebook post or an email or anything like that and inform everybody that he had died. So when he died, there was going to still be all these people coming to where he was. This was 483 BCE, right? There would be still people coming to visit him. And he said, well, if these people are coming to visit me, and they would like to arise confidence in the teachings that I share, there's kind of 4 places that they could actually visit. They could visit the place where I was born. They can visit the place where I attained enlightenment. They can visit the place where I delivered my first teaching, and they can visit the place where I die. These are the 4 sites that someone could visit to arise confidence and dedication and practicing the teachings to be able to get to enlightenment. So his students were like, okay, we understand. These are the 4 places that he was recommending to be able to visit. And he actually gave a teaching on this, and I actually have his words where he was actually teaching this. So I'll read this to you so you can see that the Buddha actually said this, because we have his original words about what he taught during his lifetime. And it's really important that you study his words, because so many people might consider what they're doing to be Buddhist, but they're not actually studying with the original words of the Buddha. I know that might sound strange to you, that a Buddhist monk or a Buddhist practitioner could consider what they're doing to be Buddhist, but yet they aren't studying the original words of the Buddha. But the original words of the Buddha are in 45 volumes of books that are this thick. It's referred to as the Pali Canon because the original words of the Buddha are documented. The largest, most complete collection we have is in the Pali language, but they've been translated into other languages. And we don't have everything he taught in the Pali Canon, and everything that's in the Pali Canon isn't what the Buddha actually taught. We would be naive to think that this document that originated over 2,500 years ago is exactly the same as it was 2,500 years ago. There's certainly been changes, but the way that you break through that is you don't believe any of his teachings. You need to learn them, examine them, investigate them. You need to reflect on them to verify if they're true or false, and then you need to practice them in order to be able to see what is true, so you'll know what is true. So this largest, most complete collection of the teachings of the Buddha in 45 volumes of books, it would cost the average Thai person about 3 months of their salary to be able to acquire a version of this. So the average person in the world doesn't actually have access to the Pali Canon. It's unfortunate that that's the case, but things are improving, because nowadays, I've been to over 200 different temples, and I've only ever been to one temple that actually shares the original words of the Buddha, right? So that's less than 1% if you do the math. So if you're going to study the original words of the Buddha and you're interested in getting to this enlightened mental state, you're going to need to have access to his original teachings. So that's why what we do is we actually consolidated this 45 volumes of books into 13 books, and then we give it away for free so that everybody can get access to it. You can download it from our website for free. You can take it and go print it if you like. You can get printed versions here at the temple by just reimbursing us for the printing costs, or if you have access to Amazon, you can order it on Amazon if your country has access to that. But these are his words where he was asked during his lifetime, after he shared with his students that he had 3 more months before he was going to die. This one student spoke up and said, "Venerable Sir, formerly monks who had spent the rains in various places used to come to see the Tathagata." The Tathagata is the Buddha, right? And the rains is during this rains retreat. 3 months out of the year, the Buddha would ask his ordained practitioners to stay in one place because 2,500 years ago, they didn't have well-defined roads and sidewalks and things like this. So if you were going to travel from one part of the country to the other, you would just walk through people's land. And during the rains period, the earth was really soft and people were maybe planting. And if people were walking through these people's property, it would damage the crops and then people wouldn't have access to food. So during 3 months out of the year, the Buddha asked his ordained practitioners to kind of stay in one place and don't really do too much travel. So here, this particular student is saying, these people have come from various places to see the Buddha. And we used to welcome them so that such well-trained monks might see you and pay their respect. But with the perfectly enlightened ones passing, meaning you're going to die, we shall no longer have a chance to do this. So this is Ananda, one of the Buddha's closest students, asking this question. Ananda was with the Buddha from the very beginning of his teaching all the way through to the end. We think that he was either his brother-in-law or his cousin or something like that. So the Buddha spoke to Ananda. He says, "Ananda, there are 4 places, the sight of which should arouse confidence in the dedicated. Which are they? Here, the Tathagata was born is the first. Here, the Tathagata attained supreme enlightenment is the second. Here, the Tathagata set in motion the wheel of the teaching, or the dhamma wheel, is the third. Here, the Tathagata attained final enlightenment or final nibbana. This is death of the physical body. Without remainder is the fourth. And Ananda, the dedicated male and female ordained practitioners, male and female household practitioners will visit those places. And any who dies while making the pilgrimage to these shrines with a devoted, committed heart will, at the breakup of the body after death, be reborn in a heavenly world. So I'm happy to report that on this pilgrimage that I went to, nobody died. So nobody went to heaven as part of our pilgrimage, because heaven is not the ideal existence. This isn't where the Buddha is teaching you to be able to do. He's not teaching you to believe a bunch of things and then hope you get to heaven and live some glorious life in the heavenly realm, because the heavenly realm is not a permanent existence. That is impermanent, just like everything else in the world. Oftentimes people are mistakenly thinking that the heavenly realm is permanent, and that's the goal, is to be a very good person during this life, and then somehow you're going to die and be in heaven and you're going to stay there forever. This isn't actually true. All of these realms are actually impermanent. You can see in the world around you the universal truth of impermanence, that things are constantly changing, that there's no such thing as a permanent existence, whether it's in the hell realm, the animal realm, the afflicted spirit realm, the human realm, or the heavenly realm. These are all impermanent existences. This is something that you can actually independently verify. None of the teachings of the Buddha are based in belief, including these 5 realms, including the cycle of rebirth, including whether or not heaven is permanent or impermanent. You can independently verify that in the world. You might not have the wisdom of how to do that, but that is something that you can acquire as part of your journey. So the Buddha is sharing here that if somebody actually died in the process of this pilgrimage, that they would be reborn in the heavenly world. But it's important to understand that that's not the ultimate goal. And like I mentioned, I'm pleased to report that nobody actually died during our pilgrimage, so nobody ended up experiencing that, which is excellent, because the important thing is to get to enlightenment now in this life. The goal is not to be able to be reborn in the heavenly world. But here you can see the Buddha is talking about these 4 places to visit. The place where he was born, the place where he attained enlightenment, the place where he set in motion the wheel of the teachings. That's his very first location that he ever taught. And then the place where he actually died. So those are the 4 places that are what's considered a Buddhist pilgrimage, that you visit these 4 places. And as you visit these 4 places, it can arise confidence and dedication. Because oftentimes people think about these individuals like the Buddha or Jesus Christ or Prophet Muhammad or things like this, and they happened so long ago that people are really confused about whether these people even existed. But when you go visit these 4 places, and there's plenty of other places in India and Nepal that you can visit associated with the life of the Buddha, it will show you that this individual absolutely lived. You can see that through his teachings. As you learn and practice his teachings, you can see the condition of your mind gradually improving, but you can also see this through the actual sites that you visit. Because as you're learning and practicing his teachings, you will see situations where you're once angry and frustrated or irritated or annoyed, that you go to those same situations and you experience those same things, and you'll notice that your mind is not angry or frustrated or annoyed any longer in those same situations. So you'll know that this individual actually lived, because you'll be learning his teachings and they actually work. And you can see, wow, the mind's becoming more and more peaceful. My life is becoming more and more joyful. My relationships are improving. You'll be able to see that through learning and practicing. But you can also see that by visiting these 4 places. And there's other places too, as I mentioned, because we didn't just visit those 4 places. We actually visited a whole bunch of other places too. We started out going to Taj Mahal in the Agra Red Fort. We actually started out this journey on December 22nd, where we all flew into New Delhi, which is the capital of India. And many of the students that were traveling were actually already there. They actually went there several days early, and they were kind of checking out India and the surrounding area. But we came in, me and my family came in. There was a total of about 15 of us on this journey. And one of the first places we went was to the Taj Mahal and the Agra Fort, because we were making our way out of New Delhi towards the sites where the Buddha was actually living during his lifetime. We visited this site as well, which is kind of like a place that people associate with the Buddha, but it probably wasn't actually true what actually occurred there. But we went to visit it anyway just to see what it was like. And we actually almost got our bus stuck. The driver went through this little tunnel, and our bus, started like topping out. It was like getting stuck. He couldn't get under the tunnel, so he had to back up and turn around and end up going a different way. So it took us a long time to get there. But this particular site, what people say occurred there, and again, this is not actually true. There's no documentation or no evidence of this. And as you hear, it's going to sound pretty outlandish for you. It's said that the Buddha, during his lifetime, went to heaven to teach his mom the teachings so that she could get to enlightenment, because the Buddha's mother died 7 days after his birth, because when he was born, he couldn't come out through the normal birthing canal. He ends up coming through the side of her stomach. And 2,500 years ago, they didn't have C-sections, and that medical technology that we have today didn't exist. So she ends up dying 7 days after his birth. So they say that he went to heaven to be able to teach her. And when he came back down after a 3-month period, he walked down a golden staircase, and there were gods who were walking down this staircase with him on the other sides of him. And when he stepped down out of the staircase, he stepped down on this particular site. So we went there. This was one of our first sites. And we went there and we just did a talk and we did some meditation. This was kind of like the real beginning of our journey to do this pilgrimage. So it's not a very well-known site. It is considered one of the top 8 sites of a Buddhist pilgrimage tour. So we went to go visit that. And us doing meditation there, essentially now people could see what the Buddha actually taught. That he didn't teach all this mystical, magical stuff, but instead he taught to actually train the mind. So we spent some time there. Then we ultimately went to this place, which was the real beginning of our tour and our pilgrimage, and kind of visiting a true site that was associated with the Buddha. Is here, it's called Jetavana Monastery, but in the Pali Canon, it's referred to as Jeta's Grove. This is the actual place where the Buddha did a significant amount of teaching. It was a very large complex where the Buddha did a significant amount of teaching. Out of the 45 rain seasons where he would have been teaching, he spent at least 19 of them there at that place. And not only did it have that location, but there's also a stupa to Angalama Mala. I'm sorry, Vibhav, I probably pronounced that wrong. But anyway, this is a stupa to one of his students. There was a student who was a murderer who had murdered 999 people. And this individual was looking to murder the 1,000th person. And during the lifetime of the Buddha, people were warning him not to go down this street because this individual was down there and he was known to be a murderer. And he would cut off the fingers of his victims and he would wear them around his neck. That's where this name comes from. And he had 999 fingers around his neck. And the Buddha was headed down this road and people were warning him, like, don't go down that road. This murderer's down there. And the Buddha understood that he wasn't causing anybody any harm. No harm would come to him. So he just walks down the street, and this murderer sees the Buddha walking, and not everybody knew that he was a Buddha during his lifetime. So he starts chasing after the Buddha with a sword. He starts chasing after him, and he's yelling to the Buddha, stop, stop, stop. And the Buddha just kept walking and walking and walking, but not paying him any mind. And this individual kept yelling, stop, stop, stop. And the Buddha just kept on walking. And then eventually this individual was yelling and hollering so much, stop, stop, stop. So the Buddha stops and he turns around and he looks him dead in the eyes and he says, I have stopped. It's you that hasn't stopped. I've stopped killing. I stopped stealing. I stopped sexual misconduct. I stopped speaking falsehoods. And I stopped taking substances that cause heedlessness. It's you that hasn't stopped. These are his 5 precepts. This is helping you to be able to understand the cause and effect between what's actually causing harm in your day-to-day life and certain decisions that you make that could be unwise, that lead to unwholesome results. Because if you're out in the world killing, stealing, having sexual misconduct, lying, or taking substances that cause heedlessness, this is going to produce unwholesome results or unwholesome dhamma in your day-to-day life. It's based in decisions that you're making. This word dhamma, or some people call it karma, it's cause and effect or action and result. It's nothing mystical or magical. It's about certain decisions that you make are going to lead to a particular result. So you would like to make wise decisions around what it is that you choose to do on a day-to-day basis. So this individual hadn't stopped killing, and that's why he was experiencing so much unwholesome dhamma. So he ends up becoming a student of the Buddha. He decides in that moment that he would like to actually study with the Buddha. So he became his student, and ultimately he got to enlightenment during the Buddha's lifetime. And this is one of the things that I share with people. Sometimes students come to me and they're like, David, I've done so many bad things in my life. I don't know if I can get to enlightenment or not. And I say, well, have you murdered 999 people? And they say, no. I was like, well, you can get to enlightenment then. There's no, lacking ability to be able to get to enlightenment. You can do it, right? So this individual is well known, and they built a stupa for him out of honor to him. And then this is an individual who actually is a merchant who actually purchased the land that this monastery is built on, a very large complex. And they built a stupa for him in honor of him as well. Because when he tried to purchase the land, he was purchasing the land from a prince. And the prince had agreed that he was going to sell him this land. And when he came back with the money to be able to purchase the land, the prince was laughing at him. And he wasn't really truly interested in selling the land. And he said to this individual merchant, he said, the only way I will sell you this land so that you can have this monastery for the Buddha is you need to cover this land with gold coins. And if you cover this entire land with gold coins, then I will sell you the land. So this individual went and he got all these gold coins and he covered this entire land with gold coins. And then the prince had to actually sell him the land. So he bought the land and then he built this monastery for the Buddha so that the Buddha could actually teach there, because he had discovered the Buddha in another part of India. And then he was interested in the Buddha coming there to be able to teach. So they built a stupa for him as well. And then we went to visit this particular place. This is actually in honor of the Buddha. It's actually a monastery, but it was given to him by a doctor. There was a doctor during the lifetime of the Buddha that actually treated him for an ailment. And he was convinced that the Buddha was an actual Buddha. So he actually donated his land. It was a mango grove, and built a temple for the Buddha. We also visited this cave. This was a really long walk for those of you guys that went. There's a couple of people online who went on this pilgrimage with me. It took me a long time to get up that hill. Boy, it was a lot of steps. I would say it was probably a good 3 kilometers up this mountain. We had to walk up all the way up this mountain to get to this cave. And what this cave is where shortly after the death of the Buddha, they started documenting his teachings. That during his lifetime, they didn't document any of his teachings because they didn't have the ability to do this. The ability ability to write things down didn't exist over 2,500 years ago. So it wasn't until after he died that they had the ability to write things down. So they started documenting his teachings by gathering at this particular cave. There was 500 enlightened beings that got together, because by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll never forget the teachings that it took for you to get to enlightenment. So 500 of those enlightened beings got together and started documenting his teachings, because your mind's performing very clearly and very optimally by that time. So that's the place where they actually documented his teachings. And then we visited this historical university, which is kind of in ruins. This was like a very large Buddhist university, which was in existence for about 700 years, and it was ultimately destroyed, but it's there so you can actually go see it. And then we visited Sujata's stupa. That's what this picture is right here. Sujata is an individual who actually offered the Buddha some rice that the Buddha was originally studying with two individual teachers, and their teachings didn't lead him to enlightenment. So he left those teachers, and he ends up just kind of training his own mind, but he was doing things like starving his body, hanging himself upside down from trees, laying on beds of nails, piercing his body with metal implements. None of that stuff is part of the path to enlightenment, but he did those things for the first 2 years with these teachers. And then ultimately when he left on his own, that's all he knew how to do. So he was basically taking this really, really far, all the way to the point where he was only eating 1 grain of rice per day. And he was basically skin and bones, and he was on the edge of the forest meditating, and Sujata came and offered him some rice and begged and pleaded with him to eat some rice. And he kind of reluctantly accepted this rice, but this is where his practice actually really accelerated, where he actually ends up training his mind and ultimately getting to enlightenment. So she's an important figure in his life. Her and her daughter actually came to offer the Buddha some rice. So there's a stupa for her in honor of her. And then because we were interested in seeing some of the rituals and ceremonies that are done by the Hindu people, we actually went and visited this place. This is like a boat tour where we went on this boat ride. It wasn't part of the pilgrimage, but nonetheless, we were interested in to go see it, where down by the river, there was all kinds of ceremonies and rituals and things like this that we were able to observe and just kind of understand what it is that they do, because it's not part of what the Buddha actually taught. So these are some of the other places that we visited. Okay, so in terms of like each individual site and what you're going to see at each site, if you decide to go to these places, is the Buddha's birthplace is in Lumbini, Nepal. So we needed to cross the border twice. We actually went from India over to Nepal and from Nepal back to India. It's a land border. It's not a very organized event as you're going through there. So it's very interesting to cross back and forth over this land border. It took us on the way back quite a long time to be able to do that. But nonetheless, it was a very fun journey, interesting part of the journey. Apologize, you guys can't see this entire thing here on the bottom. You need to actually take these rickshaws, or in Thailand we call tuk-tuks, to the birth site of the Buddha, because they don't allow gasoline vehicles and heavy vehicles to go up close to the site. So you actually, from wherever you are, we took it from our hotel, which was really close to the site. We took these rickshaws or these tuk-tuks over to the site. This is actually my wife, and my son came along as well. There was plenty of people, different families and single people as well that went. Once you arrive, there's this long walk down this long walkway, and eventually you come to this place here, which is the actual site that is considered to be where the Buddha was born. And inside here, there's an actual stone on the ground where it's said that the Buddha stepped onto the ground, and you can see the exact location where he was born into the world. It's really quiet in there, and you can't take any photos, so that's why I don't have any photos from the inside. Our tour guide was really nice, and he actually talked to the security guards there, and there was this nice little place where we could actually sit and meditate about probably just a few feet from where the Buddha was apparently born and where he stepped into the world. Now, there's nothing different about meditating in your bedroom versus meditating at a place like that, but it was surely interesting to be able to meditate at this place. The benefits and results that you experience in meditation doesn't change from one location to the next. I mean, you can meditate in the exact place where the Buddha got to enlightenment, and that's not going to change whether or not you get to enlightenment or not, because it's all about the condition of your mind. But it was surely nice to be able to do that. I'm very appreciative that our tour guide was able to arrange that. So after that, we moved off to this little area where it said that after the Buddha was born, he actually took a bath here. They actually bathed him and cleaned him. And I actually gave a talk here to help people to understand his birth and his life story and things like that. This is a pillar that is created. It's actually a replica of this is the original one over here. It was created by King Ashoka. King Ashoka was a very powerful king that was basically ruling over most of India during about 200 years after the death of the Buddha, and he had a real transformation. He ruled over a very large area of land, and during that period of time, it's very rare to see somebody with such a large kingdom, but he was a very murderous king. He was a very bloody king, that he had a very strong military, and they would go out and murder people and kill people and take over their territory. Well, as he came in contact with the teachings of the Buddha, he had a complete transformation, and he was no longer that murderous king, but he had all this rich wealth. He had all this influence in the region. So he's the one who started sending out missionaries all throughout the world to be able to share the teachings of the Buddha. And he started erecting these pillars, and he used to have the teachings of the Buddha inscripted in the pillars, and he would place them all over his kingdom so that people could learn the Buddha's teachings. So he was the one who was initially credited with kind of helping to spread the teachings of the Buddha outside of India. And we think that if it wasn't for him, that we actually wouldn't know the teachings of the Buddha, because there was a concerted effort inside of India to squash the teachings of the Buddha because they were in direct conflict with Brahmanism and the practices that existed at the time. Brahmanism is where you're born into a family, and there's a very strong caste system where 15% of society is considered to be holy people. And if you're born into this family, then you are kind of considered to be holy. And now you do rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayers for all the other people. The 85% of the population was taught that you can't actually improve your life, and that you needed to pay these people in order to do rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer on your behalf. And this was what was going on during the lifetime of the Buddha. So those individuals were very much against the teachings of the Buddha being successful, because basically the teachings of the Buddha are teaching that everybody's equal, that nobody's above anybody else, and that you can actually change your own life. You don't have to pay these people to do rituals on your behalf to be able to experience a better life. So this was in direct conflict with Brahmanism. So King Ashoka, getting the teachings of the Buddha outside of India, ensured their survival, because they would have just died with people being uninterested in seeing them flourish after the death of the Buddha. So King Ashoka built these pillars in honor of the Buddha and the people that were in his life. So this one was built in honor of the Buddha's mom, because this is where the Buddha was actually said to have been born. So this is that location. And then on the way out, there's this long canal with temples on each side of it. And it's been built, all these temples have been built by different countries. So Japan and China and Myanmar and Thailand and every country you can imagine that is practicing Buddhist teachings, they actually built temples all the way around there in order to be able to honor and respect the Buddha and the Buddha's mom. And then on the way out, it was a really cold morning. It was probably the coldest morning that we had went. There was this little family of monkeys that were hugging each other. And I was like, let me take a little picture of that. Okay. So this is the birthplace of the Buddha. Do you guys have any questions on his birth or his birthplace? Anything you guys would like to ask? No questions? Okay. All right. So the next place is the Bodh Gaya. This is where the Buddha actually is said to have gotten to enlightenment. Although he really got to enlightenment over a 6-year period, the Buddha distinguished this location as the location of where he actually got to enlightenment. And out of all the sites, this is the place that was probably had the most people. There was a ton of people here. And out of all the places, people are most interested in this site, I think, because of enlightenment. They're interested in getting to enlightenment. But out of all the places, this is the place where you see the most misunderstandings. What you're going to see is a lot of rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayers at this particular site, because people don't understand that you can't just go to this site and then pray to be able to get to enlightenment. You actually need to train your mind and uproot these pollutions. So this is kind of like the vast majority of our group here, of everybody who went on our tour. And this is some of the things that you're going to see there. This is some of the rituals here. But there's other rituals as well. Like this individual here, he just had a kind of a bowl and he had some like rocks or shells or something. And he was just pouring the shells or the rocks over top of this bowl. And he just sat there and he was just doing that all day long, just pouring these rocks or shells over top of the bowl. And, you know, these people are having different thoughts about what it is that they think they're trying to accomplish, potentially that they're trying to actually get to enlightenment. There's tons of beautiful colors and flowers. There's lots of ordained practitioners here doing ceremonies and things like this, because this is a tree that the Buddha is said to have contemplated under for 7 weeks before he decided to share his teachings. Where some people think that he sat under this tree and then he instantly got to enlightenment. So that's why people think that if they go there too, that if they sit there near that tree, that they're going to instantly get to enlightenment. This is the unfortunate part of the misunderstandings of the teachings of the Buddha, that people don't understand that it's a long-term practice, that you need to be practicing for multiple years to gradually train your mind. But because this site is designated as the location where he got to enlightenment, people think they can kind of sit nearby this tree, do some kind of ceremony, and they're going to instantly get to enlightenment. But it's not true. So you'll see all these different things there. And also I gave a talk at this location too, helping students to be able to understand enlightenment and what enlightenment is. This is the actual tree. We think it's like maybe a fourth or a sixth descendant of the original tree. And then this is the larger tree here as well. Lots and lots of people here. We didn't even, go in this area. We actually came from the backside and we were able to get close to the tree. This is the actual tree right here. They've got it kind of a concrete fence around it. So these are some of the pictures that we took in close proximity to the tree. Okay. So any questions on that site? Yes, you have a question?
Thank you, David.
Mm-hmm.
My question is not about the site. I'm wondering if people can't get to the enlightenment, are they going to rebirth, like such going to the human being, animal, etc.? Yeah, what the Buddha's taught.
Yeah, once you get to enlightenment and die, you're not going to experience rebirth in the cycle of rebirth. But what comes next after that, if anything at all, the Buddha left it as an undeclared teaching. He chose not to teach it. He actually calls it out as one of his undeclared teachings. He says, remember, what did I teach? I taught this. And he points to the Four Noble Truths: discontentedness, the cause of discontentedness, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And he says, remember what I did not teach. And he points to these 10 things that he didn't teach. And one of those things is what happens to an enlightened being when they die. Because the goal in the practice of his teachings isn't about an afterlife. It's not about what happens after this. It's about getting to peace and joy now in this life, that by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll be living the ideal life. So if there's something after this, and let's just say there is, even though he didn't say that there is or isn't, but let's just say there was, and let's just say he describes that. Well, that's one more thing that your mind's longing, yearning for, that perhaps is going to hinder you from getting to enlightenment. As long as you're longing, yearning, you're not content in the present moment. Your mind's wanting this other thing. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you need to be peaceful and joyful and content in the present moment, not longing, yearning for the next thing. That's what the unenlightened mind does, is it always thinks the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. And you get to the other side of the fence and you're like, whoa, this grass is just as green as the other grass, right? So if he described this thing, even though we don't know, right? But if there was something, then it's just one more thing your mind's longing, yearning for, and you're not content in the present moment. So he's teaching you to learn and grow and develop in this life to get to the ideal life in this life. And that's what's going to produce the peace and joy. So by the time you get to enlightenment, if there is something next or there isn't something next, so what? You're already completely peaceful and joyful in the present moment. Mm-hmm.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. All right, so now I'll share with you guys this location in Sarnath where the Buddha gave his very first teaching. After he was at that tree, he then traveled quite far. It took us several hours by bus. So the Buddha walked all this distance to this location where he ultimately encounters 4 of his previous classmates and 1 of his previous teachers, and he ends up giving a talk here, which is his very first teaching, which is the 4 Noble Truths. He explains the problem that is in the mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And in 4 simple statements that you can independently verify, you can have this breakthrough to understanding what's causing your anger and sadness and frustration and all these other feelings, so that then you can actually transform your mind. So this is the actual location where he actually did that particular talk. So they built a stupa there in honor of his very first talk. And there's a very large complex of ruins that are there as well. So I actually did a talk right there as well. And I delivered a talk of his very first teachings, the 4 Noble Truths. This was actually the last kind of site of our tour, because you don't really do them in order. It's kind of challenging. You'd be zigzagging all across the place if you did them in order. So you don't do the sites in order typically, and this was the last site that we actually visited as part of our tour. So we kind of ended the tour here, and not only was I teaching the people that were on the tour, but there were some other people who joined in to the tour as well, just kind of like people walking by. They would stop oftentimes and listen to me talk. In the future, if I do this, I'll probably take a microphone and a speaker so that people could actually hear me a little bit better, because sometimes it was challenging for people to be able to hear me. So what he was teaching, his very first teaching, was right view. This is his eightfold path. This is his core central teaching, that if you're interested in getting to enlightenment, you would need to learn this eightfold path in detail. This is the actual path to enlightenment. And it starts with the very first teaching of right view, which is the very first teaching that he shared, which is the 4 Noble Truths. In order to understand the 4 Noble Truths, you need to understand the 3 Universal Truths, where you understand that the world around you is constantly changing, that it is impermanent, that things are going to arise, change, and fade away. This is something you can independently verify in your life. Then you need to understand that the unenlightened mind is going to experience discontent feelings, which are conditioned feelings, that there's pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant feelings. This is what the unenlightened mind experiences, where it goes up and down and up and down. This is the problem that the Buddha discovered. Then he also teaches as the 3 Universal Truths that there's the universal truth of non-self, that this body nor this mind is you and who you are, but your mind will tend to cling to it, wanting it to be permanent. This is why if you've ever been in a social situation and you spill something on your clothing and you were embarrassed by that, that's because you're clinging to this body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And you can only be happy if you're being perceived that way. Or you might be clinging to your identity, like I am Chinese, or I am American, or I am Canadian, or I am German. Any of this I am around your identity. So this universal truth of non-self is the solution to that, helping you to be able to see that this body nor this mind is who you are. So these are like building blocks that I normally walk through over like a 20 or 30-minute period to help students to understand the 3 universal truths. And then there's understanding craving, desire, attachment, that the mind is longing, yearning. This is a way that we describe wants and expectations in the teachings of the Buddha, that the mind is having this unquenchable thirst, that it is chasing and chasing and chasing. It's like the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction, where the mind thinks, what do I need to be happy? I know what? I need more money. That is what'll solve everything. Let me get some more money. So the mind will chase more money for a while. And then if you get what you want, you'll be happy. But then eventually that happiness will wear off. And if you don't get what you want, you'll be sad or frustrated. And then the mind's like, what do I need to be happy? A new boyfriend or a new girlfriend. That'll solve everything. Let me get one of those for a while. And now you might chase that. And then maybe you'll get a boyfriend or girlfriend and you'll be happy for a period of time. But then you'll start getting angry and frustrated with that person too. And you're like, what do I need to be happy? I know what? Let me go to Thailand. That'll fix everything. Let me go to Thailand. And then now you might come to Thailand and you're so excited about going to Thailand. But then when it's time to go back home, you're like, I got to go back home. I'm going to miss the massages and the mango and sticky rice and the elephants. They were so much fun. I don't want to go back home, right? So the mind is having this craving, desire, attachment, this longing, yearning, trying to seek satisfaction externally. And once you understand those, you can understand the Buddha's very first teaching, that each unenlightened being is experiencing discontentedness. This is the problem that you experience, that your mind's happy and excited, but then it's sad and frustrated and irritated, but then you're lonely and bored, but then you get excited again and you're so thrilled, but then you get embarrassed and disappointed. The mind's going up and down and up and down. This is the problem of every unenlightened being that they're experiencing. Your mind can't be stable and steady and making wise decisions in your day-to-day life, that it's only a matter of time before you become frustrated or agitated about something. Then the second noble truth is explaining that these discontent feelings is caused by craving, desire, attachment. The mind's longing, yearning. It's chasing after the objects of your affection. So for example, if it's sunny outside, you might get really, really happy and excited about that. But then when it changes to rain, you'll be frustrated or agitated or annoyed. Or if your bank account balance is up here, you'll be really happy and excited about that. But then when your bank account balance goes down here, you'll be frustrated or annoyed. The only thing that's happened here is change. But your mind craves permanence, wanting things to be permanent, where in reality, everything's constantly changing. So you can see that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. It's not the outside world, because it's just changed from sun to rain. Or your bank account balance has changed from here to here. It's not the outside world. Oftentimes people think that it's other people who are causing them to be angry or frustrated, where in reality, the true cause of your discontentedness is a craving for permanence. The mind is longing and yearning. And when you experience those painful feelings, you'll firmly believe that it's the outside world that's causing it. So you will tend to push people away, or you will push the situation away. This is called aversion, where you might have pushed away friends or family members out of your life. Or the second thing you'll do is you'll be bitter and harsh and hostile towards people through your intentions, your speech, and your actions, and it damages your relationships. Or the third thing you'll do is you'll put your expectations on people and try to control people or pressure them to do things your way. And as long as you're doing that, you can't live harmoniously with all people, because it's only a matter of time before someone does something differently than what you want them to do it. And now you'll push them away, you'll be bitter, harsh, and hostile to them, or you'll put your expectations on them. And people might actually be doing this to you too, where they're trying to push you away or be bitter, harsh, and hostile to you, or putting expectations on you. So you need to be able to look at your own life to be able to independently verify this second noble truth. You can't just believe what it is that I'm sharing with you, because what I'm sharing with you is that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. Look at your own life. Look at a recent time where you've been angry or frustrated or agitated or annoyed. It could have been this morning or yesterday or last week. Look at that situation with these fresh eyes. What was it that your mind was longing and yearning for? What did you want? And if you would have gotten that, you would have been happy or excited. But because you didn't get what you wanted or expected, your mind was angry or frustrated. This is the mind craving permanence, wanting things to be permanent. You can think back when we were children. We wanted chocolate and ice cream, and we begged and pleaded with our parents to give us chocolate and ice cream. And whenever they would give it to us, we'd be so happy and excited about that. But then someday came along and they didn't give us chocolate and ice cream. And we were angry and we were frustrated. And we thought it was mommy and daddy who was making us angry, where in reality it was our own mind. But we just didn't understand that, because we didn't learn that wisdom as we were growing up, that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. So you probably have people in your life right now that you think are causing you to be angry or frustrated. Maybe your mom and dad, your brothers and sisters, maybe your boss or your coworkers or your friends. These people aren't causing you to be angry. It's your own mind that's causing this, where you're craving permanence. They could be doing something that's unwise. That's true, that they could be doing something that's unwise, but that's not what causes you to be angry. It's your mind craving permanence. So for example, if you brought a brand new car and you were so happy with this brand new car, and you drove it to a store and you parked it, and you went inside and you came out and there's a scratch on your car and you get frustrated, it's not the scratch that's causing this, and it's not the person who scratched your car. What's causing the anger and frustration is the mind's craving permanence. It's wanting this car to look permanently beautiful, where in reality, this car can't be permanently beautiful. It's not possible, because the paint's going to fade, the upholstery is going to get ripped and torn, the tires are going to need to be changed. You need to be able to see that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, even though the mind oftentimes has a difficult time to see this. but it's very empowering to be able to see it. Because when you see that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings, then you can understand that you can actually solve it. As long as you go around the world thinking that it's other people who are causing you to be angry or sad or frustrated, you'll never actually be able to fix it. So that's what the third noble truth is explaining, that the elimination of discontentedness is possible by eliminating craving, desire, attachment. If you eliminate this longing, yearning, this chasing after the objects of your affection, where your mind's craving permanence, you can actually get to a point where the mind's completely peaceful and joyful. And that's a permanent mental state that the mind can be in. And the way to do that is through the Eightfold Path. That's the fourth noble truth. That's the way to completely eliminate the discontentedness, by training the mind through this path. So this Eightfold Path is something that somebody would learn, and it all starts with the first step, which is right view. And that's what the Buddha taught at this particular site. So this particular site is designated as where the Buddha gave his very first teaching. And you can actually go visit it and see where he actually gave his very first teaching. So I just went over this very briefly, the first teaching of the Buddha. Normally I take 45 minutes or an hour to walk students through that. Do you guys have any questions on this site or his very first teaching? No questions? Okay, I don't see any questions online either. Okay, so the very last site is where the Buddha actually died. This is in Kushinagar, India, where you can actually visit the location and the site where he actually died. He died where the stomach lining was essentially pulling away from his stomach, and this is why he died. Sometimes people think that he ate a poisonous sandwich. You might hear this. This is such a huge myth. People think that the Buddha was at a party, and he knew that there was this poisonous sandwich on the table, and he didn't want anybody else to eat this poisonous sandwich and get hurt by the poisonous sandwich, so he ate it himself. So basically, he committed suicide. That's what people think, that an enlightened being, this wise individual, would do that. Well, you're not even enlightened, and you're not as wise as the Buddha. If you knew that there was a poisonous sandwich on the table at a party, what would you do? Throw it away, right? That's what you would do, right? So do we really think this individual who's so wise actually ate this sandwich? No, that's not what occurred. You can see it in his teachings. You can see in the Pali Canon, they documented how he actually died. But for some reason, people just believe in these different stories and thinking that he somehow ate a poisonous sandwich. So he actually did die at this location. They actually have this place set up where you can actually see where he actually died. And these are some of the people, again, who traveled on our trip with us. You can see some of these pictures. You can go inside this site. It's actually one of the quieter sites. There wasn't as many people there when we went there. It was in the morning when we went there, so there wasn't so many people. And we were once again able to sit really close. We were actually sitting within, probably a few feet or a few meters of where the Buddha is said to have died. And we were able to sit down and meditate. This is the location where he's said to have died. So we have this location, and you can go there and visit it, and you can see where he died. And we also visited the place where he was cremated. That's there. And then this is where Sujata's stupa is as well. So we visited all these different places. So these are the last words of the Buddha prior to his death. He said, because he knew that his words were going to be important and that people would really pay attention to his last words, he said, "And now, monks, I declare to you, all conditioned things are of a nature to decay. Strive on untiringly." He said more than that, but this was literally his last words just before death. His very last words were his very first teaching, because his very first teaching is to understand that the world is impermanent and things are constantly changing around you. The reason why that's his first teaching is because the unenlightened mind craves permanence. This is the underlying thing that's causing the mind to experience anger, sadness, frustration, and other things. So he used his last words to deliver a final teaching, which he had already been teaching impermanence prior to that, but he was just reminding people, hey, all conditioned things are of a nature to decay, meaning his body is going to die. It's not going to be here permanently. Now strive on untiringly. Keep making the effort to be able to get to enlightenment. Don't be complacent, right? So these are the Buddha's last words, where he used his last words to deliver one of his very first, most important teachings, and then also to encourage you to strive on to enlightenment. If everybody could just taste enlightenment just for a few moments, and you could know what that mental state is like, there would be nothing that would stand in your way to actually get to that. It's kind of like when we were children. The very first time we tasted chocolate, it was like, whoa, get out of my way. I want some more of that, right? It's kind of the same thing. If you could just taste the enlightened mental state and understand how peaceful and how joyful this mental state is, it's beyond anything you've ever experienced. If you've used drugs and alcohol, it's way beyond any of that stuff. And this is a permanent mental state. So that's why the Buddha is encouraging you to strive on to be able to continue to work towards this mental state through wise decision making. Because what the Buddhist teachings are, is it's to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt ever again. That's what his teachings do. It guides you in being able to train your mind so that you never need to hurt ever again. But it's important to understand what's hurting you is not the outside world. That's what people typically perceive it to be. It's actually the inner world. It's what's going on in one's own mind. But oftentimes the mind's ego will not allow you to be able to learn this. Your ego is going to think, I'm right and everyone else is wrong. I'm perfect and everyone else is the problem. The mind really enjoys staying in this delusion because then it doesn't have to actually do the work to be able to learn and grow and develop and actually experience more and more improvement in your life. So that ego is keeping your mind in that state of thinking I'm right and everyone else is wrong and everyone else is the problem. Whereas if you peer into this closely through the teachings of the Buddha, you can see that it's the mind itself that is having these challenges, and you can heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt again. But you need to lower the ego enough that you can see that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings through gradually walking through these teachings to be able to penetrate into them and independently verify them. So this is everything that I have to share with you guys. I'll just open up to whatever questions you guys have, whether it's about anything that I shared here or anything from your own practice, your own meditation, what you're seeing with Buddhism, or anything that you're challenged with in your day-to-day life. You guys are welcome to ask any and all questions that you like. Looks like we have some questions. Yeah, feel free to get a microphone. And for those of you guys online, you can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Yes,
Hey,
ma'am.
David, I have a question about the last side. I'm curious, like, what happened after Buddha died? Like, his students buried him or burned? And what about the bone ashes, or like, I heard something like the toy, the bone of the toy, and maybe buried in a temple or something. Is this true or false?
He was cremated, and I think his ashes, they kind of spread them out and kind of split them out. There's some temples that claim that they have like the tooth of the Buddha, or they might have a bone of the Buddha. If they do, fine, great. That's not actually going to help you get to enlightenment, no matter what that is. If you went there and touched it, or even if you put it in your mouth or anything like this, it's not going to get the pollution out of your mind. But if you go to enough of these temples and you start documenting all the places that say they have a tooth of the Buddha didn't have that many teeth, right? So somebody somewhere is misunderstanding, right? So, but even if they do have the tooth of the Buddha, it's not going to change your ability to get to enlightenment. So there are places that claim that they have these relics of the Buddha. And of course, it draws people into the temple. But at the end of the day, you need the teachings and you need the training to apply to your mind. And that's what's going to produce enlightenment. And then shortly after his death, about 3 to 6 months, that's where they got together and they started documenting his teachings. That's what happened after his death. Yep, you're welcome. Did you have a question? I saw you raise your hand. Yeah, we have some microphones here.
Hello. My question actually arose from the story you mentioned about the murder and the Buddha. I heard quite similar stories in, when I go to church, study the Jesus, and also read the Bible, read the book about Islam religions. So my confusion is about, I feel like Buddha, this Buddha should be telling about like Asian philosophy. But the stories makes me feeling like he is like kind of like a misled, to be like a mystic central figures. So my question is, how do you interpret these kind of stories?
I don't interpret his stories at all. There's nothing in his teachings that you need to interpret, because the way that a Buddha teaches is very clear, concise, and precise. It's not like you have to interpret things. It's very clear what the Buddha is teaching. But each one of these stories, it helps you to understand a certain aspect of his life and the people that were living during that time. But the teachings is what's going to help you to understand what actually leads to enlightenment. So this story about Angulimala, who is the individual who was the murderer, what that helps you to be able to know is that no matter what you've done in the past, you can still make your way to enlightenment. Because sometimes people think that it's based on what they did in the past that's going to determine if you can get to enlightenment, where it's not. It actually is based on the condition of your mind now in the present moment. So no matter what we've done in the past, we can actually train our mind to be able to get to enlightenment, whether you've stolen, whether you've lied, whether you've cheated, whether you've had sexual misconduct, whether you've drugs and alcohol, any of these other things, it doesn't matter. Those are decisions that you made in the past, and it's not hindering you today from being able to make your way to enlightenment. So that particular story is a great story to help illustrate that. And there's other stories like this that illustrate some aspect of that, but it's the actual teachings that are going to guide you to enlightenment. And that's not a story. It doesn't need to be interpreted. There isn't any kind of underlying meaning that you have to figure out. It's nothing mystical or magical or secretive. It's very clear. But unfortunately, not many people study with his original words, or they don't have reliable translations. So therefore, it's very challenging for them to be able to understand how to get to enlightenment.
Okay, could I say that should I interpret, if I use the word interpret, should I interpret as like a not historical fact, but as the narrative, as a story?
Yeah, you can take it as a story. And some of the stories, like the one that I shared with you, it's not in the Pali Canon, but the one where he came walking down out of the sky, you can know that something like that is not true, right? Like you don't see human beings ascending into the heavens and walking down a staircase. This just isn't true for these kinds of things to occur. So that's why this collection of teachings in the Pali Canon, we know that not everything the Buddha taught is in the Pali Canon, because we see things that he's referring to and it's not in the Pali Canon, but you could see him referring to it, like loving kindness meditation. We know that he taught loving kindness meditation because he refers to it in the Pali Canon, but you don't find anywhere in the Pali Canon where it's actually documented how he actually did loving kindness meditation. So there's things that he taught that aren't in the Pali Canon. And we also know that there's things that are in the Pali Canon that he never taught. In the way that you actually penetrate through that is you don't believe any of it. You learn, reflect, and practice to be able to train your mind to see the truth. And you need a teacher, you need a guide, because you're not a Buddha. Only a Buddha would be able to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. So you need a tour guide. That's what a teacher is. We're like a tour guide pointing out for you the things to learn, but you are your own independent practitioner, learning to grow and develop and cultivate wisdom on the path. You're not a devotee or a follower or anything like that. You're not following anybody. You're an independent practitioner looking to cultivate wisdom, so that wisdom can be cultivated through the intellectual learning of the Pali Canon, but then you need to reflect on that to verify if it's true, but then you need to practice it, integrating the teachings into your day-to-day life where you're practicing what the Buddha taught, because the tools and the techniques he taught is what's going to uproot the pollution out of the mind, and that's where you're going to see the improvement in your day-to-day life. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. My second question is, has the Buddha mentioned about like past life and the future life?
Yeah, he talked about his past lives. He described several of them, like what he did in his past lives, but he didn't describe what he was going to experience next after this. We call it final enlightenment. When an enlightened being dies, we don't actually even call it death. As an unenlightened being, you're experiencing death because you die, and then you're going to experience another birth because you're unenlightened. There's causes and conditions that lead to this rebirth. But as an enlightened being, you're outside of that cycle of birth and death. You're no longer experiencing that over and over and over again. So when an enlightened being gets to the point at the end of this life, we call it final enlightenment. And the reason why is that in this life as an enlightened being, your mind will experience complete peace and complete joy. There's nothing that can shake up your mind, but you'll still experience a little bit of physical pain. That physical pain is very muted and very minimal compared to what you experience when you're in the unenlightened state. As an unenlightened being, you'll experience physical pain, but then you'll experience mental anguish along with it. So for example, if you stump your toe, you'll experience the physical sensation of the pain of the body, but then your mind will experience mental anguish because your mind is craving permanent comfort of the body, And when you're not experiencing that, your mind doesn't like it. When your mind gets what it wants, it's happy. But when you don't get what you want, you're angry and frustrated. So that's why when you stump your toe, you experience physical pain, but then you experience mental anguish along with it, where you're frustrated and angry and irritated. By the time you get to enlightenment, if you stump your toe, you'll experience the physical pain, but you won't experience the mental anguish along with it. So we call this, when you get to the end of this life, we call it final enlightenment, because no matter how enlightened you are, you're still going to experience some minor physical pain. But by the time you get to the end of this life, the body and the mind separate, and you're no longer experiencing any physical pain at that point. So as long as you're alive, you will still experience just a small amount, just a little bit, right? You could actually break your ribs and you could still be joyful in your mind. You're not joyful because you broke your ribs. You're joyful despite the fact that you've cracked your ribs, for example, right? So this little bit of physical pain, you actually need it in the enlightened mental state, because if you were standing too close to a fire and you didn't know that that was the case, the body would get damaged, right? So you need to know, oh, I'm standing too close to a fire, let me move, right? So it's kind of like two darts. In the unenlightened state, you get hit with the first dart, which is the physical pain, and then you get hit with a second dart, which is the mental pain, right? As an enlightened being, you only get hit with the first dart, the physical pain. And it's just very minimal. You don't get the second one. You don't get the mental anguish. So that's why at the end of this life, we call it final enlightenment, because you can eliminate all your cravings, desires, attachments where things are attached and bound up. But as long as you're alive, you can't eliminate the body and the mind being together. Those two things are going to continue until the end of this life. And at the end of this life, with the breakup of the body and the mind separate. So now we call that final enlightenment. So the Buddha experienced final enlightenment at the end of this life, where his body and mind separated. And now he will never be reborn again. He will never come back into the world again. He will never experience existence ever again. He was peaceful and joyful from the age of 35 to 80. And now, if anything did or didn't happen after that, it's an undeclared teaching. But we know that he experienced final enlightenment.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I just got another question. I ask this question because, in China, when I visit some temples and listen some monks talking, they quite often just talk about like past life, the life before this current life, and also life. So that about when we're talking about enlightenment, actually the Buddha actually focusing on the current present life. So my question is, have the Buddha really, when we be enlightened, are we going to be out of the circle of the past life and the future life, or are we going to get permissed to get better for the next life? So I'm not quite sure whether they are talking past life and the future life is really from Buddha's words.
Yeah, so it's pretty common that the unenlightened mind will dwell in the past or worry or long and yearn for the future, where the Buddha is teaching you to come into the present moment and focus on the present moment and training your mind in the present moment. So this path to enlightenment isn't about what happens next. This path to enlightenment is about getting to an ideal life now. So even though we understand there have been past lives and there's been countless past lives, you don't dwell there and you don't focus on that. You focus on your current life. And if you don't get to enlightenment, we know that there will be future lives, but you don't focus on that either. You focus on this life of training your mind in this life. That's what you would like to be focused on. You're welcome. Yes. More questions? Okay, so the question for those of you guys online is, what was the most impressive moment during the trip? And has there been any changes for me since the trip? I would say the most impressive moment that was on the entire trip is when the entire bus broke out in a dance party. That was the most impressive moment of the entire trip. And what has changed afterwards is I realized that all these people had a great time. And sure, there were people that had some challenges along the way on the tour, but it was a great time. It was a lot of impermanence. It was wonderful to see the group come together. It was wonderful to see all the generosity. The students were practicing generosity extensively with each other all the way throughout the trip. And that was really warming to be able to see. But in terms of my mind and everything like that, nothing changed because I've already trained my mind. And it was nice to be able to go to these sites and to see these sites. And the places that I enjoyed the most, that's kind of along the lines of your question, is the places where the Buddha did teaching. So the Jeddah Grove, and the place where he gave his very first teaching, those were the places that I felt was the most amazing. And those were the places that were actually the least visited. The place that was most visited was the place where he got to enlightenment. But the places where he did the teaching, that had the most meaning for me, because that's what I'm doing, is sharing his teachings. And being in the exact places where he actually shared teachings, that was very meaningful for me. Yeah. More questions? Yeah. Go for it. If you guys could get mics, that would be great.
I have two questions. Thanks, David. The first one is I'm funding an AI business myself, and you make a startup is very difficult, and you will encounter some problems. So when you suffering from some problems, you should ask for some help, for example, from Buddha. What bothers me is that if is there any some pattern when I realize in my word, and how many times should I spend on learning some wisdom, is such as Buddha? This is the first question.
Sure. It's important to understand that the Buddha cannot help you now.
Okay.
What he did during his life, that was the biggest help he could do, is during his life is share his teachings. You can't pray to the Buddha and ask for help. I mean, you could, that could be your choice, but it's not going to work. The Buddha describes that there's no ability to be able to improve your life through prayer. And one of the things that he said, if it was as simple as praying to acquire the things that we would like in life, then who among us would lack for anything, right? So if you think about that for a minute, it makes a lot of sense, because if it was just so easy to pray and then woof, you'd have a new house and you'd have a new job and you'd have employees to work for you and more money, then who among us would lack for anything, because we could just pray our way to a better life. And that's not the way that any of this works. So it's important to keep that in mind. The second part is, if I was you, I would prioritize the training of your mind, because that's what's going to lead to the peace and joy in this life. Think of it as like a full-time job. I'm sure you already have a full-time job, but think about this as a full-time job, that from the moment you wake up all day long and as you're going to sleep, you're training your mind. Sure, there's meditation that you're training your mind 2 or 3 times a day, but you can be training your mind right now, like just listening to me talk. You're focused and having concentration, and you're having awareness of your mind. And when you walk down the street, you're watching over your mind. If you see your mind is judging people and looking down on people, you got to cut that off and don't allow your mind to do that. If you're noticing anger and frustration coming up in your mind as you're driving in traffic, you need to cut that off. It's a full-time job to train your mind. But the beauty is that if you dedicate and prioritize your time to be able to do this, this is a permanent solution. This is to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt ever again. And it absolutely works. His teachings will absolutely lead to this enlightened mental state when you learn the true teachings and you practice the true teachings. So I would definitely prioritize this and make this a top priority in your life, because by training your mind, everything else will go wonderful. Because it's kind of like the CPU of a computer, since you're into computers, right? If the CPU is working well, the whole computer will work well. But if the CPU is not working well, nothing on the computer is actually going to work well. Your mind is like the CPU of this being. And if it's polluted and if it's hindered and it's not well taken care of, then it's not going to perform well. It's kind of like you clean this body every day and you found some benefit in that, so that's why you clean it. But if you haven't learned how to clean your mind, you're walking around with this mind that hasn't been cleaned. And now that's why you experience uncomfortableness. Because if you actually walked around for a few days or a few weeks, a few months, or say a few years without cleaning this body, you'd be very uncomfortable. But that's what people are doing with the mind, because we didn't learn that wisdom growing up as a child. So people are walking around with a mind that hasn't been trained and purified. So now people feel very uncomfortable. So I would prioritize that if I was you.
Sounds very insightful. Second one is I want to know what's the biggest difference between before and after your enlightenment.
So I wouldn't say to someone that I am enlightened, because an enlightened being wouldn't say that, but they also wouldn't say that they aren't enlightened either, because that would be lying. Right. So if you say you are enlightened, that would be arrogant and boastful and being prideful. So someone who's gotten to enlightenment, they don't go around bragging that they're enlightened. But also an enlightened being isn't going to say they aren't enlightened either. But I'll just speak with you based on my experience without saying whether I am enlightened or aren't enlightened. Prior to enlightenment, you're going to be experiencing all kinds of difficulties and struggles. Your mind's going to be angry and sad and resentful and guilt and shame and fear and stress and anxiety and all these other things. And so many different situations. You'll spend a lot of wasted time just being angry and arguing with people and being frustrated and trying to convince people that you're right and they're wrong. After enlightenment, your mind's completely peaceful, completely joyful. You're not going out into the world trying to convince people that you're right and they're wrong. You're not wasting all your time just being angry and arguing. You have all this time available to you. It's almost like getting an entire day every single day back, because in an entire day, if you're awake for 12, 14, 16 hours a day, you're spending a certain portion of that day being angry and frustrated and arguing with people, right? And that's hindering you from being able to make wise decisions to move your life forward. But when you get rid of all that, get rid of the anger and the frustration, get rid of the arguing and trying to convince people that you're right and they're wrong, now you can just make wise decisions to move your life forward. So you're no longer struggling and having difficulties in your day-to-day life. Anything that's happening in your day-to-day life, it's all wholesome. It's all beneficial for your life. And now as all that wholesome dhamma is coming back to you, you're just making wiser and wiser decisions to be able to improve your life. And you're no longer struggling and having difficulties in your day-to-day life, because you understand the natural laws and you understand how to make wise decisions in your day-to-day life. I was talking to a student recently, and I was explaining, we were talking and I was saying, you know, pretty much everything you buy these days comes with an instruction manual, right? I had a pitcher of water next to me, and I was like, you know, probably this pitcher of water probably has an instruction manual associated with it. We're given instruction manuals to use every single thing that we ever encounter, but nobody gave us an instruction manual of how to live a better life. Nobody gave that to us. Nobody gave us an instruction manual about this human being, who we are. But the Buddha has an instruction manual to be able to help you to understand this being who you are in the world around you. And now when you understand that, that's where you can actually get to the point where your mind's awake. And what we mean by awake is you've cultivated wisdom to navigate the world peacefully and joyfully without struggles and difficulties. So that's the main differences. Is before enlightenment, things are very difficult and life can feel sometimes miserable and like a really difficult existence. After enlightenment, life is so peaceful and so joyful, and you're not struggling and having difficulties any longer.
Sorry to add a question. I'm pretty curious about would you still feel angry or frustrated some days, or you just can't feel, but or you can control it, so you just lower its threshold?
At this point in my life, I don't experience any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all those feelings. I haven't experienced them for a very long time. And that's why I'm dedicated to helping people to understand that, because there's a choice that you can make. You can continue to experience those things, which some people choose to do, or there's this better way of life that the Buddha taught, and you can experience it for yourself. So I don't experience those things any longer. Yep.
David, so I got, after hearing you talking about before and after, I'm curious, have you had any experience with the counseling?
With what?
With the counseling, that's psychology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
What the difference do you see that to seeing a counselor or go through improve yourself or to learn yourself by psychology and also by kind of following Buddha's enlightenment?
Yeah, so I'm not a trained psychiatrist or psychologist or anything like that. I've just kind of dabbled in it with some college classes that I took. And then also at one time I was receiving therapy as a patient. So from my experience, what I noticed is that modern psychology is teaching you how to manage your feelings or cope with your feelings. And typically they're looking to the past to help you be able to look at your past. And typically, oftentimes, excuses are given that based on your upbringing, based on your parents, based on your situations, this is why you're experiencing what you're experiencing. Where the Buddha is not doing that. What the Buddha is teaching you how to do is not cope with your feelings or manage your feelings. He's teaching you how to eliminate the causes and conditions that are producing them. And he's not blaming other people for the feelings that you experience, but he's showing you how it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. And that's a real difference. I've never seen anything else on the face of this earth that is teaching you how to eliminate your anger, sadness, frustration, and all these other feelings. I've only ever seen people teach you how to cope with them or manage them, but you're still actually experiencing them. You can get beyond that. Just like with like an email list, you can opt out and unsubscribe. It's the same thing. You can unsubscribe to anger. You can unsubscribe to stress and anxiety, but you just need to know the wisdom of how to do that.
Okay, so I got that. So the wisdom of the enlightenment is like I don't ask any reason behind that feelings and emotions. I just to eliminate that.
Yeah, so the Buddha is teaching you the reason why you're experiencing those feelings. That's an important part. He's teaching you the cause of why they're actually occurring, where over here in what I've seen with modern psychology, they're usually blaming it on brain chemistry, or they're going to blame it on other people or environmental factors or things like this, where this isn't actually true. And for someone who's eliminated their anger, sadness, frustration, all these other feelings, you would have had to have known what's causing it so that then you can address that cause. And then that's what's going to help you to eliminate it.
Okay, that's quite interesting. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Up to you guys. I saw this young lady waiting for a while in the black shirt. Yeah. I know you've been very patient, so go ahead.
2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is about the practicalities of meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm relatively new in meditation, and I'm practicing meditation in order to be able to be more intentional in my life and more present in the current moment. And I was wondering if you have some kind of practical guidance to give on how many times one should meditate, for how long, in which time of the day, and how this can be maybe combined with the physical exercise when one takes care also of the body and not only of the mind. And
Sure.
I'll move on to the second question afterwards.
Sure. All you really need is about 2 or 3 meditations per day for about 30 minutes. But you need to be able to learn it in the way that the Buddha taught, because right now there's hundreds, if not thousands, of meditations out there. And oftentimes these meditations are taking your mind in the opposite direction of enlightenment. There's only 4 meditations that the Buddha ever taught. And if you learn those 4, that's the only 4 you'll ever need. And 2 of them are primary forms of meditation. And if you do those 2 or 3 times per day for 30 minutes, that's all you really need. Morning, midday, and evening. There isn't any kind of exact time that you need to meditate, because it's impossible to meditate at the exact same time every day because of impermanence. But if you meditate morning, midday, and evening for 30 minutes, that's really all you actually need. Whether you do any kind of physical exercise or anything, that's up to each individual. Not everybody will choose to do that, but that's an option for you to be able to care for the body.
My second question relates to what you said before about the Buddha saying that there is no worship, there is no prayer necessary.
Mm-hmm.
How is this then linked to having all those temples around and people visiting the temples and seeing that there are certain rituals that seem to me like prayers? How do those things fit together?
Yeah, sure. So what a temple is it's a learning center. It's a community center. It's kind of like the womb of a woman. The womb of a woman is the very best place to grow into a human being. A temple is that. It's a womb of a woman that you can enter into and you can grow and develop into a better and better human being. That's the way the Buddha taught. So if you went and visited the places where he taught, that's what that was. That was the womb that he was able to teach within. And he was the one who was kind of nourishing the students through his teachings. Nowadays, 2,500 years later, there's been a lot of impermanence, a lot of change. People have changed his teachings. And we're at this low point. And he talked about this. He talked about these 500-year cycles that we would go through. And that's exactly what occurred. And at this last 500-year cycle, he taught about how people would be utterly confused about what it is that he taught. So we see all throughout the world, there's all kinds of temples that people are doing rituals and ceremonies and prayer and all these kinds of things. But these aren't the original teachings of the Buddha. These are people that are misunderstanding. So that's why it's really important that you base what you learn and practice on his original teachings, which is found in these books and found in all the other resources that I share. And then you don't believe what I share. You don't believe the books that I write. You don't believe the videos. You learn it, reflect on it, and practice it and see the truth for yourself. But when people are misunderstanding, you don't judge them. You don't look down on them. You just understand that, you've seen the original teachings of the Buddha. Once you study them, you've seen that, you know what that is, and you just have compassion for these people, which is concern for their misfortune. So when I went to these sites and I saw people doing rituals, I didn't look down on them. I didn't think they were bad people. I just understood that that's where they're at in their life. And I had nothing but compassion, which was concern for their misfortune. But I know there's countless misunderstandings in the world. And that's why I'm so interested in sharing what the Buddha taught, so people can see what did he actually teach and what he didn't teach. Mm-hmm. Yep. More questions?
Okay. Hi, David.
Mm-hmm.
I want to share my experience during the meditation.
Mm-hmm.
When I try meditation,
Mm-hmm.
or you can say I train my mind in my daily life. Sometimes I find peace inside me, but sometimes I just seeking the truth. You maybe said that, but maybe not the real truth. Maybe some questions. Yes. Do you think it's a normal flu in your mind, and you can experience that, and you can find some peace sometimes, and you will seeking some questions sometimes?
Yeah, so you can experience those things in meditation, but that's not the goal of the meditation. The goal of the meditation is to eliminate certain unwholesome qualities and cultivate certain wholesome qualities. It's like taking your mind to the gym and you're exercising your mind, and now you use those qualities in your day-to-day life. The peace and the joy isn't going to be experienced through the meditation. It's actually through the meditation that you're developing the qualities that you need to then in your day-to-day life be actively training your mind. So there's more than just meditation that you would need. So what you're describing is not the ultimate goal of meditation and what you're actually looking to accomplish. With this particular meditation that we did this morning, breathing mindfulness meditation, you're focused on the breath. And anytime the mind moves off the breath, you cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath. The goal here is to develop mindfulness or awareness of mind. That's a wholesome quality. So when your mind moves off the breath and you notice that, that's your mindfulness. That's your awareness of mind. When you cut it off and let it go, that's training your mind to let go. Because with craving, desire, attachment, your mind doesn't know how to let go. That's why it's experiencing anger and sadness and frustration. That's why when you broke up with a boyfriend or girlfriend, your mind couldn't let go. You were angry, you were frustrated, you were lonely and bored, you were missing this person, but eventually your mind let go. And that's where you gained your peace and your joy. So this meditation is training your mind to let go. And then you're developing concentration as well when you're focused on the breath. So what you're describing is what people can experience, but that's not the goal. You would like to actually get closer and closer to noticing your thoughts sooner and sooner and cutting them off and letting them go easier and easier. That's what's going to produce the benefits for you in meditation, this particular meditation.
So this ability of mind can use in experiencing different things, right?
Yeah, everybody can have different experiences in meditation, but you're not looking to gain any wisdom or insight in your meditation. You're not looking to go to La La Land for any period of time, right? You're looking to focus on the breath, and anytime the mind moves off the breath, cut that off and let it go and come back. It's kind of like the animals being tied to a post or pillar. They're pulling and pulling and pulling. And each time they pull, the animals get yanked back to the post and pillar. Eventually, the animals realize they're tied to this post and pillar, and they just sit down and they're calm next to the post and pillar. So your mind's the same way. The breath is your post and your pillar, and it's going to be pulling and pulling, and you keep yanking it back and yanking it back. And eventually, over a long-term period of time, your mind will be calm, and it's going to sit down and be calm and still rather than keep pulling and pulling like that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
I have the similar question. Like I saw the temples here, some temples they don't allow women to enter. I want to know the original rule from Buddha.
Okay, the Buddha never taught that. That is something that people are misunderstanding. There's no reason why a woman or a man or transgender or anybody wouldn't be able to go into a temple. There's nothing harmful by different genders going into a temple. In fact, a temple should be open arms to invite everybody and anybody into the temple. But unfortunately, these temples, some of them are misunderstanding, and they're doing things like that. And each of these temples are independently operated. So there's not one person in Buddhism that's telling everybody else what they should or shouldn't be doing. So each temple is free to do whatever it is that they would like to do. So there's at least one temple here in Chiang Mai that I know of that doesn't allow women in. You wouldn't be interested in going in that kind of temple anyway, because they're not understanding the teachings of the Buddha. And there's nothing that the Buddha ever taught like that whatsoever. Everybody and anybody is welcome into a temple.
Yeah, because you said it's equal for everyone from Buddha teaching. So I think the temple, they don't allow the women to enter in. That's not from Buddha's teaching.
Yeah. I can tell you where this misunderstanding comes from is that some Thai people, not all of them, of course, but a very small percentage, they think that women have a lot of strong spiritual power, particularly when they're menstruating. And they think that if they allow menstruating women into their temple, that they're going to bring this very strong, powerful spiritual energy, and it's going to damage their temple, like meaning the spiritual energy of the temple, which has nothing to do with the teachings of the Buddha whatsoever. But that's where that thought process comes from, and it's not from the Buddha.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question about money, because I know a lot of people have anxiety, because I always feel like I don't have enough money. I want to earn to a certain amount, and I think I have to work to earn money in my life. So I don't think I can live here or live in a very chill place for a long time. So my question is, how about your perspective to money? Yeah.
So money is just kind of like an accounting system that we put effort into various things that we do on our day-to-day basis. And the money allows us to account for that effort. And then it allows us to easily acquire the things that we need. Where in the old days, it was a barter system, right? It's like, if you clean my house, then maybe I will cut your grass or something like that. Or if I clean your house, maybe you will cut my grass, right? And now we'll kind of like have this exchange. And that's based on a mutual agreement. And that means that you need to have countless people who you're able to barter with. And you have to have things to be able to barter with them. But when you go into a service industry, like the way we have a lot of services now, and you have global trade and things like this, you can't really barter with everybody. So there's an accounting system, which is currency and money, to be able to help us account for how much effort or intelligence have we put into any one particular product or service. And now we're acquire those resources so that now we can acquire resources over here for something else that we need. So the mind can get really attached to money because it helps you to acquire so many things. And you need to get to the point where you don't see it as something that's going to bring you pleasure, but instead it's just a means to accomplish the things that you need to accomplish. It's like water, that you need water in order to nourish this body and make sure this body's healthy. You're going to need a certain amount of money in order to be able to acquire the things that you need. But just like water, it comes and goes and it evaporates. It's the same thing with money. Money comes and goes and it evaporates, and you just use it as a way of a means to be able to acquire the things that you need. And you don't need to stack up an enormous amount of money. And now, wow, I feel so accomplished. I got $5 million. I don't have $5 million, but I have $5 million in the bank. And wow, I feel so accomplished. Okay, well, now you're happy, but guess what? After that, you're going to want 8 million, and then you're going to want 10 million and 15 million. You're going to want to keep growing it, right? So that's just feeding the mind's ego, where in reality, you just need enough money to handle your day-to-day activities, and you need to have some stacked up in the bank, probably a good 3 to 6 months worth at least, so that if you're unemployed for an extended period of time, you're not going to go hungry, and you have expenses that you can cover with that money. And then, of course, you'd like to save for retirement as well, because as you age, you're not going to be able to work as much. So you'd like to use some of your money. You'd like to store some of your money for your more immediate needs, like in the next 3 to 6 months. But then you'd also like to have some investments and some money that you've put away for when you get old that you're not going to be able to work. So you'd like to be sure you have some money to be able to take care of yourself, to acquire your needs at that point too.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And not forming your feelings based on how much you have or don't have. That's where you need to train your mind to do.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Let me just check online if we have anything else. I don't see any other questions anywhere. So, we have a question? Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Sorry, recently I just learned how to do meditation, but I try sometimes. I want to know how to concentrate, because sometimes when I do meditation at home, I always lost, and sometimes I got a hurry in my mind. Always think a lot, and I can't get back. I don't know if you can give me some suggestions for beginners. And I want to know another thing is how to balance the Buddha meditation with your real life. I think it's helpful because sometimes you will feel, like you said, angry about something, frustrating about something. Sometimes, because I tried meditation after recently, sometimes I also feel that, and I can notice that, but it's a little hard for me to deal with it. I can feel it now.
Yeah, you don't have all the tools and techniques that you need in order to be able to train your mind fully. You're going to need to know the entire Eightfold Path, which meditation is part of that. So maybe after I end here, you can come and I'll get you connected with the resources you need. Mainly, it's this first book that you would like to really get started with, but there's also audiobooks and videos and podcasts and things like this. So I can get you plugged into the resources that you need. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right. So I'll just end by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest to grow and develop on the path. As you guys would like to learn more, there's plenty of opportunities for this. On this Friday, we actually have a social event where you can come and play games with our community. People come in at 6 o'clock on Friday, and we play some music, we play games, we have food and different things like this. You can come and join for that if you like. On Saturday, we have our Pali Canon and English study group, which is where we study the original words of the Buddha. This Saturday, we have an introduction to the teachings of the Buddha course. It's a 3-hour course from 1 to 4, where I'm going to be sharing what are the teachings of the Buddha and what the teachings of the Buddha are not. And then I'm going to be sharing his very first teaching. On Sunday, we have our group learning program where I'm going to be sharing a topic of the 4 stages of enlightenment and the 10 fetters, helping students to be able to understand what this is, because we recently restarted this program. So you guys are welcome to attend that. And next week, we have a Foundation in the Path to Enlightenment course, which is 9 to 3 from Monday through Friday, where you can learn all the foundational teachings to really be able to get on the path to enlightenment and start training your mind. So whatever you choose to do today, have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee krap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.